together, and let's think about it. So let's do a shorter warm-up so we can have time to talk about or go through the 13 postures and the applications of it. So we'll do a quick warm-up. So from here, feet parallel, knees bent. Bend forward, straighten the legs. Roll down. Come back up. Hands on kidneys back. And back to center. And again. Straighten the legs. Roll down. Come back up. Hands on kidneys, back. And back to center. And again. And back up. Hands on kidneys. And back. Last time going side to side. So straighten the legs. Roll down. And gently swing from foot to foot. And back to center. And come back up. Hands on kidneys, kick back. And back to center. And carry the tiger. Stretch. Drop the arm. Open the chest, rotate the shoulder. And turn the hands over, settle. Knees bent, hips tucked. And again. Hold, basic posture. Knees are bent, hips are tucked, shoulders relaxed, spine is long. And breath is in the belly. And drop. Now let's go straight into Play the Pipa. So shift, turn, and forehead to the sweep up. Back to center. Other side. Back to center. Horse stance. Squat. Push the knees open. Get the inner thigh stretch. And squat. And shift. And shift, toes up. And shift. And back to center. And walk the feet in. All right. That's the official Michuan or hidden tradition warm-ups, by the way. Everything else is stuff I've added from other tradition, from Qigong exercises. So okay, so let's take a look at 13 postures in light of the application. So, but let me make a caveat about this. The 13 postures is more useful if you actually don't think too much about the precise applications. And if you think more in terms of the 13 postures being an introduction to all the principles that we're going to be using later on in the form. It doesn't mean that there are no applications, because every move that we make in the 13 postures is found later on in the long form. But because the 13 postures is an introduction, it's more useful to think of it in terms of principles. So what principles are we learning by doing the 13 postures? Because later on in the form is where we start seeing variations on the 13 postures, but we're also seeing the real applications, the real fighting techniques and all that are in the long form. So the function of the 13 postures is to essentially introduce the grammar that we'll be using later on, right? It's all the basic principles, it's all the ideas, whether it's in terms of orientation, foot position, stepping, the different kind of stepping that we do, and the general qualities that we want to have, so that we have all of that set when we move to the long form, the empty hand form, and then we can use all of these principles and apply them for applications, right? And I bring this up because we're going to go through the applications. But what's going to be more important in this overview is not the specific or precise application of the move. What's more important is the feel or the principles that are illustrated by that application, right? So the 13 postures is the place where you can actually give yourself a little more leeway in terms of when you're doing it, in order to explore those principles, as opposed to trying to do it precisely for the application, if that makes sense, right? So that's what we'll talk about applications, but I think talking about the general principles of the movement themselves is really what's going to be the focus, as opposed to the actual fighting application, because that's the goal, that's the purpose of the 13 postures. All right, so let's take a look. So we'll talk a bit about some of the applications in the first part, or the feeling, the general principles in the first part, and then we'll actually do the 13 postures at the end. So 13 postures, right? So we're here, turn, move, stand up, sit down. One of the things I want to bring your attention to is to the fact that the first moves of the 13 postures, there's a lot of circles, right? And it's essentially an exploration of circles along the horizontal plane, and the vertical plane, right? Because the very first moves, right? So we move along horizontal, vertical, down, horizontal, vertical. Right. So we're doing horizontal, vertical. So the legs are just rising up and down. The arms are changing directions. Horizontal, vertical. Horizontal, vertical. The first beginning is grasp the sparrow's tail. This is grasp the sparrow's tail. The whole thing. I tend to skip over and just go, okay, this is, first we do ward off, and then we do grasp the sparrow's tail. It's actually all a single thing. And the one thing I want to bring out is that this is ward off, roll back, push, press. Right. It's not a coincidence that the first move that we see in the 13 postures is an introduction to the 4 major moves of our form. Right? There's 8 moves, 4 major, 4 minor. So we literally start the form. We start the 13 postures with those 4 moves. Right? So we're here, we shift and we turn. So go here so you can see the feet. We're here, we shift, we bring the foot in. Shift the weight and turn. Right? Shifting the weight and turning. And notice that the arms are in front of the shoulders. And so it's the hips that are turning, it's the body that's turning, it's not the arms going sideways. And it's a sitting back and then a rising up. Hand and foot come together, the whole body moves as one into here. All right. So here the idea is somebody either pushes against the shoulder or is trying to grab you by the shoulder, and you're here. This arm goes over your opponent's shoulder and then circles in. All right. So that's why you have this shifting back. Notice if there's an attack of the shoulder, just by sitting onto that rear leg, we're creating distance between where my shoulder used to be and where my shoulder is now, simply by sitting down. Right? So that's the first principle, that we can create space within our own footprint by sitting, by shifting, by sitting fully. The whole body can shift and move. In this case, my foot is turned in, so when I shift and I turn, so you can see how much distance is created between the point of impact if somebody were to push against me or grab me, and simply by doing this. So within my own footwork, my foot space, I've created distance. So it's not about getting out of the way, it's literally within your own space. You can create distance simply by sitting down on that one leg, turning the hip. The arm extends that motion. Right? So the arm, once again, is an expression of that turn of the hips and the shifting of the weight. So it's not my arm goes sideways, it's my arm turns because my body turns. And that's going to be a really important idea that we keep going back to. The fact that the body turns. I'm going to ask you to always, when you visualize applications or interact with somebody else, that it's not somebody who's far away. Right? Often we have demonstrations of application where it's like two people doing fisticuffs and somebody pretends to throw a punch and they're 2 arm lengths away and like the block is over here. That's not what we want. We want to imagine that somebody is here, there's pressure. So somebody right next to you, they actually have contact with the body. So the turn here, all the movement is your inner movement, your core is moved. It's not the arm waving something away. The core is turning because that's also the core creating the power. So when I'm here, my arm is up and I turn, it's not the arm moving, it's the core turning. So then the only real thing I need to do is this with the arm. Because the power, so here, somebody's arm is here, and I turn, I'm brushing away their arm. But I'm not doing it with arm strength. I'm doing it with core strength. That makes sense? The only muscle that I need is to simply hold my arm up here, right? My hand is not moving in relationship to my body. So this idea, right, that your hand is putting pressure on somebody else, you're affecting somebody else with your hand, but it's not done with hand or arm muscle, it's done with core muscle and leg muscle, right? That's a core idea that we're going to keep using. So the muscles that you're using are the muscles of the core, not the arm, right? So here, this is a sweep, and then it's drawn in and push out, right? And here, with both hands, so I turn, circle, sit down, step out, ward off. So the idea here and the feeling that you want to have is that of creating a spiral. So there's here, the body turns, circle, and so there's somebody's arm that you're wrapping around. So now you're sweeping it so that now they're here, and so this hand is going to drop so that I can hold it, step out, and break their elbow. All right? So it's a circle. And you can see that if you then follow up. So draw in, away, step into their space, grasp the sparrow's tail, throw, press. You can see how we've created all of these spirals going in different directions. Spirals going forward to the side, along the vertical, horizontal, spirals going back, spirals going forward, back to center and press. All right. So if you connect all of these moves, that's when you have that sense of spiral, spiral. It all comes from the waist. Right? So that's the first challenge of this beginning of the 13 postures. That's the first principle that we're learning. How to move the arms through space by using the center, by using the core. Right? So it's not the arms moving through space, it's the core moving. That's where there's the stepping. Yeah. Yeah, good. Okay. Rising up, sit down, step out, ward off, sit back, open, rise up, sit back, rise up. All right? Your hips and your legs are creating this wave, this undulating wave of power, essentially. Every time you rise up or every time you sit down, you're creating a wave of power. And so then the arms are using that wave of power because you're going up and down, up and down, up and down. Going down, forward, back, forward, up and down. So then the arms are then using, right, that wave in different directions. Up and down, up and down. Does that make sense? All right, so you're creating this power. Power is going up through, carried by the spine into the shoulders. The shoulders then express it in different directions. Up and down, up and down, up and down, up. All right, so it's sine wave. Yin and yang, transforming from one to the other. And each transformation generates power. From yang going to yin is power, from yin going to yang is power. Different qualities of power, but there's still types of power going up and down. And the arms use that to then express something. So, one thing you don't want to do is to start thinking in terms of beats in that sense, right? It's a sine wave. There's peaks and valleys, but there's no beats. There's no stopping. So it's not 1, 2, then 3, 4, because that breaks the wave. So it really has to be 1. The fact that you're up is what allows you to go down. The fact that you're down is what makes you go up or forward in this case, right? So it's a single 1, and it's still a 1. Boom. Right, single wave. The whole way through. All right. So center moves, legs go up and down, hips turn. That's what makes all the arms move. So then we go to the next move, seal it closed. And again, seal it closed after press is here, 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 here. Right? All of that is seal it closed. And this is another, in a way, transformation. So one thing, notice that in the first segment, and I think I mentioned this before, the first segment of the 13 postures, so there's three segments, each segment repeated 4 times in the 4 directions. In this first segment, notice that we never take a full step. All right, we only do a half step, which means that if I'm here, and my right foot is forward, my right foot will always be the one forward. Right? Through all of this, right foot forward, right foot forward. My right foot is still the one in front, back, front, right? Because we're doing this half step shift back. All right? So again, it's one of those first introduction to basic principles in the 13 postures. The idea that you can do all of this without changing the orientation of your hips. You don't have to step. You can actually instead do half steps. All right? So we're here and we're doing, but every time we do a half step, we're changing the orientation, like which shoulder is forward or back. Okay, so that's the first, and we'll see that each segment of the 13 postures has different stepping principles that are being explained. So, but keep that in mind, right? So everything that you do, right, is essentially right arm. At the beginning, the first one is right arm heavy. Step here, shift, boom. Right. Right leg is always in front. And then we turn and we do the other side. Then it's the opposite. It's the left leg that's leading. But so first segment, we're introduced to half steps. Half steps. All right. So the same foot is forward. So anyway, so let's go back. So we're press, right? Because we've done all of this. Grasp the sparrow's tail. Again. Let's just again to clarify. So we've done ward off, and this you can think of as breaking somebody's arm actually here, or simply pushing somebody away. Grasp the sparrow's tail. That person that you try to break their arm, they slipped out, and instead they're pushing back. So you sit back and absorb that push by sitting back, roll back. This hand is here, right, to protect from a kick or a strike to the groin, and then we rise up. And then we come back to center by sitting, and then we rise up when we rise and strike. Right? So it's sitting down, rising up, sitting down, rising up. And here, the sit is down, the rise up, and we're pushing that way. But one thing I want you to take notice of is the direction of your intent, which is also the direction of your head. Because that's going to become a limiting factor in a lot of other moves that we do, right? Because if you were to just think of the hips, you would sit down and then you'd rise up and now you're facing this way, right? So if my head follows my hips, I go front and then I go sideways to the diagonal. But my head instead goes front, stays front. So my head actually is turning so it stays front. And we want that because in terms of the application, there's somebody in front of you who just threw a punch, you deflect. So when you rise up, you're not going over here looking that way because my opponent is here in front of me. So that becomes a limiting factor because I don't want to go here. I want to go here, right? Because that is the line of my intent. If my head turns as well, it's very easy to make the mistake of going too far in this push, right? Of going here, and then you rise up, and then your hand essentially crosses your own center, and you're now pushing over here. The problem with this is that you're closing yourself off. It's very easy if you're here for somebody to just put pressure on your arm, and now you're stuck, and now you can't do anything, right? Because you're all closed off. So you want to start thinking of that the head position, which is an indication of your intent. Where are you looking? To become that limiting factor, it should create a line, which is essentially your midline, right? Your line of intent. That's a line that you want to be very careful of crossing. So when I'm here, my hands are going to come to the midline. And again, it's not the physical midline of the body. It also is, but it's mostly the intent. That line that is pointed towards your opponent. And my hand does not want to really cross that line. So I'm going to come here. So no matter what, I throw, but I stop here. Because now I'm here, I'm centered. Here I'm closed, here I'm not. Right? Here my arm can still be open, there can be space under the armpit, and I'm here. Now I'm in a position where I'm not putting myself in danger. I'm still protecting, right? And here I'm protecting, but I'm not crossing midlines. And we'll find that again in twist the joint. Twist the joint is here, not here. Here, not here. And the difference is literally that midline. So you want to start thinking of that. You want to start having that sense of the midline, that vertical plane that essentially is shooting from you towards your opponent. And everything you do has that midline in the back of your head. Right? That's why even in push hands, you never turn this far, you go this far. It's a small difference, but here I'm actually weak. Somebody can push me and I can't resist. Here, somebody push, I can resist. Simply because I'm not crossing that midline. It's a really important principle. It's easier to feel in push hands when somebody's actually pushing you. You can feel the difference in how well you can resist here to here. The slight difference can make a huge difference. Like the slight shift in terms of inches can make a huge difference in terms of how much resistance you can put. So here we have, in the 13 postures, this first idea of the midline. The head turns, points in the direction of your opponent. We'll see in the second section, when during brush knee, at the beginning, we turn the head, and then we turn the head. That's not on purpose. It's because we're shifting the direction of the energy. Now it's going back. We want the energy to go back. And then we turn the head because now, even though the body hasn't shifted, the head turns because now our attention is over there. And then we do something, right? So in the second segment of the 13 postures, we have an example of how that head turn, right, indicates where our intent is, where to draw that midline. So here, grasp the sparrow's tail, midline is here, front. So I go here, and no more. Not here. So you can see my foot. I turn the foot here, open the heel so I can turn the hip joint. I can really open the hip so I can make that full turn. But when I rise up, I don't turn the heel to go that way, because that would turn my hip and send me that way, crossing that midline. Instead, I sit, I rise up, and when I hit the midline, my foot is pointing front. That's the direction of my intent. Boom, and I stop. Come back to center. My foot is still pointing front. Press. My foot is still pointing front. All right? So your front foot, expresses essentially the direction of your intent. All right? And that's where this concept of the midline becomes important, because it's really easy to forget and to simply be taken with the movement going, oh, the movement is this way, so therefore my whole body's going to go that way. But no, your head is facing that way. Your head is facing front. So actually, your body is going to express that intent. All right? That's the main role of the head, the eyes, right? As the third dantian is to express your intent. So everything can move, everything can rotate, right? Hips can turn, shoulders can turn, but my intent is this way, right? So you can have all of this variation, all of this movement, but your intent is forward and doesn't shift. So that's the role of the upper dantian. That's the role of the head and the eyes, and it has to guide the rest of the movement. All right. So I don't want to belabor that point too much, but you'll see how if you have that principle in mind, it then corrects the mistakes automatically. My intent is here, my foot points that way. Boom. Come back. Press. Okay? So then when we come back here, shift, sit back, boom. Step forward, boom. Again, hips don't turn. My intent is forward, so my front foot, right? So we just didn't press. Here, my front foot points front. here, shift back, my front foot points front. At no point, right, am I turning the foot in the second half and seal it closed, because I don't have to, because my hips are in line, my intent is forward. Right? So the first half, rest the sparrow's tail, all circles. Circles, circles, circles in the push. And then we go to the circle in the press. Press is also kind of has a circle quality to it. And then we come to seal it closed. Straight line. Straight line. Okay. You see, this is what I mean by 13 postures are less about necessarily the applications as principle, but it's more about the principles behind the applications. Right? So circles in the beginning, straight lines. Arms are moving, but you're expressing straight lines of force. Does that make sense? Then here, straight back, drop, push. A little straight line of force, straight line of force. Right? Comes in, comes out. The body, because your arms are always going to do circles, your elbows can only bend certain ways. Your body's is going to make circles, but you're expressing straight lines of force. Does that make sense? Right?
Yep.
So here, my hips are rotating, but my arm is expressing a straight line. Straight line. Boom. Boom. Before we were expressing circles, right? Circles, circle, straight lines, straight lines. So we've experienced within the first segment of the 13 postures, circles, straight lines, right? So we're exploring the geometry of Tai Chi in that sense. Then later on in the long form, we'll see how all these geometries then develop into functional applications. So that's the first section. Any questions? Let's do the 13 postures. Any questions about that? We'll go back and look and review afterwards for membership. Is that
the only one I have is where are we? Into this one.
Okay.
How the body moves.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So again, thinking back in terms of principles that we're using here. So when we do seal it closed here, right? And so the question is there a turn in the body or anything? And the answer is no. Right? We're going to come here, turn, strike. Right? So we're here, 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 strike.
Okay.
Right?
Because we're on that straight line of attack at that point.
Exactly.
And just kind of rapid fire.
Yeah.
Concept.
Exactly, because if we were to turn this way, right? So we see, and again, this is where in the long form, the first one, we have something similar, right? After a kick, and we have a step through an extension, but in that move, right, the whole body pivots. Whereas here, the body does not pivot. So if we were here and I were to turn, then notice that in order for me to turn here, and if I want the energy to go sideways, I'm going to turn and my foot would pivot, right? In order for my hips to turn correctly. And if I wanted to turn here to make the energy go that way. So then when I step through, I would want to actually step through and turn the body. It would have been an invitation to do a strike like this. But we're not. We're going straight back and straight forward. So we're not turning. We're not adding a turn. There's no rising up. It's simply come in and out. Straight line. Right? Otherwise, this would be a move. Like if you were to really bring somebody to the side. Right? But then you would turn that foot and it would turn into a different.
There's no turn.
So there's no turn in the foot.
But is there sinking on the back leg?
But there is. So we've risen up in ward off. So we sink in the back leg, and this elbow drops. The hands come along to the midline. Then the hand turns, and then we shift forward and strike. So this is a linear application in that sense, right? The one trap, like the one yin aspect, is the dropping of the elbow. That's what creates the deflection. Somebody's pushing against you, you drop the elbow, it creates an empty space that they fall into, and then you control and you strike. All right, but it's very much a drawing forward. Drawing forward. You're here, they push against the arm, you draw them in, control, strike. Here, here, right? It's again that half step, half step, half step. Right? The whole point of the half step is that you're not turning the hips. Right? The half step means that my hips, they come to square, but I'm not turning. Like if I step, my hips go from here to facing here. All right, so the whole point is we're not doing that. We're squaring the hips and forward, but we're not changing the orientation of the hips. All right, so it's center, push, center, push, center, push, center, push. All right. So let's go ahead and do the 13 postures. We'll do the whole 13 postures. And next time I'll take a look at the second section to see what other kind of general principles we can extract from here. So, 13 postures. And ho. 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 Cool. All right. So this was a little more of a physical Tai Chi session, but it's important because you need to get that sense, that feeling of the center moving and how the momentum of the center can generate motion in the arms. You get a sense of directionality of the energy, and you can only get that if you have momentum. So let's close off. Let's go ahead and do Celestial Tiger. So feet parallel, knees bent, hips tucked, shoulders relaxed. And so repeat this 3 times. So inhale, raise the arms. Ho. Palms down. Shit. Ho. Palms up. Shit. Ho. Fingers pointing out. Shit. Ho. Palms out. Shit. Ho. Pointing up. Shit. Ho. Open the heart to the heavens. Ho. Shit. Reach back towards the kidney. Ho. Squat. Shit. Ho. Shit. Ho. Again. Shit. Ho. 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 Pull the hands on the belly. And feet together, arms to the side. And let's take a bow. All right. So Q&A continues in the membership. So go to HiddenTaichi.com. Ciao.